Study Section 5. International Monetary Fund / World Bank Loan Conditionality and African Developments. Introduction. In the previous study section, we discussed the nature of African post-colonial economy, which have been summarized as underdeveloped, or some would euphemistically say developing. Whichever way, African economy has done nothing to improve the lives of the people. In this study section, we will examine the roles of certain international financial organizations such as International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank in ensuring African development or underdevelopment. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to explain the activities of World Bank and IMF. You should be able to discuss the roles of these financial organizations in ensuring African development or underdevelopment. Activities of international financial organizations. The World Bank claims our goal is to reduce poverty. The World Bank comprises only two institutions: International Bank for Reconstruction and Development (IBRD) and International Development Association (IDA). It also incorporates the International Financial Corporation (IFC), Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency (MIGA), and the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes (ICSID). The rationale behind the establishment of the World Bank was to encourage development. Similarly, the International Monetary Fund has been seen as an important economic actor among the many international agencies of our day. Governments in different parts of the world are largely dependent on this institution for leadership in evaluating and resolving the key challenges of world finance. Skouyi-Holtz, 1987, posited that the IMF and the World Bank has yet to resolve the major problem that it faces as an institution, and that its most influential members refuse to recognize as they try to fashion a world economic order dominated politically, legally, and institutionally by the market elite, and the fund has yet to make the cultural and political leap necessary to understand and work with, rather than against the majority of its members who are in the third world. Ismail, 2004, stated that since the 1980s, the United States government, which dominates both bodies, has used them to economically subjugate the developing countries. The World Bank and IMF has forced third world countries to open their economies to Western penetration and increase exports of primary goods to wealthy nations. These steps, amongst others, have multiplied profits of the Western multinational corporations while subjecting third world countries to horrendous level of poverty, unemployment, malnutrition, illiteracy, and economic decline. The region worst affected has been Africa. The World Bank and IMF loan conditionality to African countries, which reflected the African economy negatively, are found in the Structural Adjustment Program (SAP), which includes opening of markets to imports, devaluation of overvalued currencies, cutting government spending, reducing price control and subsidies, and reducing direct state ownership of industries. Spiritual and Fred, 1999 to 361. Both policies have negative effects on African economy. Opening of markets to import has affected the industries in Africa negatively because the local manufacturing industries cannot compete with the industries of the developed nations. The roles of selected financial organizations on African economy. 1. Currency devaluation. Devaluation of currencies is one of the major loan conditionality by the international financial organizations. These policies further led to the crumbling of the economies of these African states, including Nigeria. This is because imported goods are bought at a higher cost than its worth before the loan was given to Nigerian, and this led to low value of the currency in the global markets. 2. Cut in government spending. Another major economic condition given to developing countries is a cut in the government spending. This policy had a negative turn of most governments in the developing world, including Nigeria. This further led to the reduction in allocation to some sectors of the states, specifically the educational sector, which is below the recommended United States resolution for a state budget on education. The end product of these policies forced upon African states, and Nigeria in particular, led to the poor standard of education. The state is currently faced with all forms of malpractices within the educational sector and a constant strike action in the country's higher educational system, setting educational development backwards and meaningful educational progress meaningless. 3. Reduction in price control and subsidy. Reducing price control of commodities leads to inflation in the commodity of imported goods in the markets, whereby the major marketers of those major industrialized goods determine the price of the commodity. The IMF and World Bank also involves in the control of commodity in the international markets, where they fix the price of the commodity to their own benefit because they are involved in the manufacturing of those industrialized goods and consider the price of raw materials on the grounds that they can prefer alternative way of getting raw materials. 4. Reduction in direct state ownership. Reduction in direct state ownership of industries enhance the process of privatization of all industries within the country, whose investors are individuals and firms from the developed countries of the north, and with enormous control of the IMF and the World Bank. The inability of African government to transform the economy of their respective countries and properly manage industries under the care makes them vulnerable to or depend more on Western aid. Moreover, majority of the loans given by IMF and World Bank for projects are executed by countries of the global north whose headquarters are located in the donor's land, resending the capital to the economy, while better the alternatives abound. Study section summary. In this study section, we pointed out that the international financial organizations are instruments of Western imperialist power deployed to further impoverish African states. The conditions for loan which most African states accepted can be regarded as one of the major crises of economic on the development in the country. Policies such as devaluation of one's currencies, state reduction in spending or subsidy, which led to the structural adjustment program introduced by most African states. Policies which resulted to stifle economic challenges on Africans and led to protests from some quarters. Reduction in state ownership of industries, which the sale of industries within the countries. Western industrialists. Lastly, the power in determining market prices. All these have negative tone down. Take 2. Lastly, the power in determining market prices. All these have negative tone on the economics of African states, including Nigeria, and are thus apathetic to African development agenda. End of study section 5. Thank you for listening.